Right, watcher, welcome back. Now, it's a very quick one. Interim, you might say, in between the projects. The remap on the Triumph went very well. The nicest part of it was the guys up there said it's, when he started mapping it, he said that, oh, incidentally, they said it's not worth filming it. Honestly, it took less time than I would say it takes to fill your bike up with fuel. It was ridiculously quick. They take the seat off. There's a plug under there that's got a 6-inch length of cable. They pull that out of a little clip that it lives in, plug it into their laptop lead, which is a long lead, and up comes the menu. And there's 6 or 7 drop-down menu of different maps, and just click the one. On this they put the aftermarket exhaust map. It's just a general map that fuels a little bit more. The Zard map and the TOR map, Triumph Off-Road map, and the Arrow map are all extras you can get, but they're for 2-into-1 systems. And the nicest part was they said, oh, that's a Zard, isn't it? And they honestly believed that that was a Zard exhaust at first glance. So I'm very proud of that. That's quite nice. And they were very impressed. So that's good of them. And it literally took, I would say, 2 minutes. It clicked send, you know, execute, enter, and then the blue scroller bar went across, click, that's it, remapped. Took that's it. Pulled the plug out, put the seat back on. It wasn't worth filming, plus the fact it just didn't feel right. Anyway, so it's done. Now the next thing is going to be suspension, but before I get back into that, I want to do a little something interim. It's that time of year again. We did a video, didn't we? What was it, about 2 years ago? Probably about 2 years ago, when we first got the Bandit at Doom on the road. This is the winter bike, it does all the bad weather work, and that was something, it was the brake cleaning, the winter brake cleaning. Actually, I've done quite a few of them. I did one on the Hayabusa as well. This business, when your brake, the front wheel starts to bind, the rear's not so serious, it really isn't. If it's bad, then you've got to do it, but if it's just a little bit on the back, that's okay, because it's a driven wheel. But the front wheel, if it's binding, that can be very, very dangerous. So what I'm going to do today is just refresh this quick little bit of housekeeping for your front brakes, so that you can do it on yours and keep yourself safe, because it is getting to be that time. Went out on this a couple of times this week, and it just comes back covered in sand. There's grit and sand and filth on the roads, and they collect inside your brake caliper, and they harbour it. They stop it retracting out the way. That means it's gripping. That crud builds up around the gum line, if you will, of the pistons, and as they come out, they stay out. The only amount of pressure that pulls those pads back away from the disc and releases the brakes completely is a little spring up inside the master cylinder. When you let that brake off, that spring pushes back, and a little bit of vacuum or hydraulic, negative hydraulic pressure pulls back and just sucks the pads back. Only by maybe 50,000ths of an inch, not by much, but it then makes them free. But when around where the pistons go into their hole, they come in and out of their hole, you get crud build up around their edge, and that stops them going back in. So the brakes stay on, and the more you actuate them, the more crud gets on there, that stays on. Now, I was watching, what's prompted me to make this video, is I was watching an extremely prolific and very highly qualified riding instructor who is a very busy vlogger and has got 4 times the subscribers, how'd you say it? 4 times the subs that we have, and will probably always be popular because he gives a great message. He's a very highly qualified instructor and a nice guy. Now what he said recently was that when your front brakes are binding, that's very dangerous, because it's a bit like riding along with your brake on a little bit. Now if you're going around a wet bend, would you have your brake on a bit on the front? Well, of course not, because then that negative resistance on the tyre as you lean the bike over is going to cause it to lock, and you're just going to low side. Bang, down it goes. It's extremely dangerous, especially when you're going along and you might have that little bit of frost or that little bit of unseen ice, and as you hit it, that resistance that your front wheel's got in turning is enough for that wheel to lock, and down you go in a big old heap. So it's not very funny. But his advice is what prompted me to make this video. His advice was, when your front brake starts to bind, take it to a reputable dealer. Well, you can do that, because they'll fix it for you for a fee. But y'all know me, you can do it yourself. So here's a little bit of housekeeping how to do your brakes to make them completely free running, and there's no time like the winter that they need to be completely free running. So enough chat, I'm going to show you what we do. Let's take the caliper off and see how bad it is. Suzuki Bandit, pretty much Nissan caliper, same as pretty much any bike. First thing to do on the Bandit is just release the little Allen key or the little Allen bolt in the centre, which is the brake pad retaining pin. And once it's nice and free and you've got it moving, because obviously it's in situ on the fork leg, it's nicely held. Nothing worse than taking that off and then finding you can't hold it still while you try and get that bolt undone. Next thing is the 2 bolts that hold the caliper onto the leg. Just release them off. Take those 2 bolts out. Alright, now to release the caliper from the disc, remember that distance I mentioned from the pad face to the disc face is probably about 25 to 50 thousandths of an inch, not much, and if they're binding it's actually less, it's nothing. So to get the caliper free, grab the caliper in your hand and you're rotating in that action. And what that does is it wiggles the pads back just a little bit, not much. Get it free of these 2 lugs here, then just give it a little bit of force that way, a little bit that way, and then you've released the grip of the disc. There we go. Now look at the state of that. Come up close, man. That is really foul. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to leave it all connected. We don't need to take anything off. Take that pad out. I've already taken the little R clip out the back. Now this is the time when you thank yourself for putting copper slip or anti-seize, whatever you might use, on your fasteners, because they come out better. Take that pin out, and there's a little clip on the back which presses down on them, and then they will literally drop clean out the bottom. Okay, now when you look at, just hold that there on this table, when you look at these, they're not handed, they're no left hand and right hand, they're just the same. So it doesn't matter which way around they go, and they haven't got, some you'll have little metal shims on the back, just preserve those and keep everything in order. So they're plenty of meat on those, but we're going to clean them up in a minute. Next thing, caliper there. Now if you have a look in there, can you close in? That is really minging. It's this time of year that you get all that crap in there. So what we're going to do is reach up to the lever and give them a little pump. Now what you're looking for is as you pump the lever, or even the brake lever, is all 4 of them moving out. There's one moving. So I'm going to hold that one still, because obviously that's the path of least resistance. I'll try and get the others moving. There's 2. And as they all, just make sure they all come out. Right, so eventually, with a little bit of messing around, pop the pads back in one side to block those 2 and then pump it so you put the pressure on them. Basically get them out. Once you've got these pistons out enough so you can see shiny stuff, that's good, because you've then exposed the gum line, which is what we're talking about. And then all we need, bucket of soapy water. Get yourself a tin of this, carburetor or brake cleaner, clutch cleaner. Give that a good spray in there first. And then, after a couple of seconds to soak, old toothbrush. Now this is literally just dish soap. What you do is soap your dishes with. And the technique is to get in there like that, coming close, and get all that crap that's around the gum line off. It's not corrosion, not usually, it's just brake dust and salt. And all in around that point where they touch, where that stuff's going to cack up and seize the brakes. Now this is just a 10-15 minute job, being really meticulous all the way around, all inside there, every little place. You know, toothbrush, loads of soapy water.
Yeah, don't mind.
Not yours, yeah, it's a bit gritty if you use yours, isn't it? Yeah, use the wife, say. A bit gritty if you use your own. That's an old joke, isn't it? You said that last time, yeah? And there we are, you just, as you can see there, look, already you're getting that stuff off, which builds up and bungs them up, stops them retracting. Right, remember what I said, dish soap. You can do it with it all connected up. And before anybody emails or sends in the comments box and says, oh, that's dish soap, Del, that's dangerous, it contains salt. Yeah, well, what do the roads contain? And if anybody says, ah, hot water, that's dangerous, you'll make the seals will contract. Hot water, think about it. How hot do your brakes get? There's no damage, and I guarantee you this, I will guarantee you this, no damage can be done to your brakes by using red hot soapy water. The more time you take over this, every 12 months, every winter when this comes along, take the trouble to do it, and then you won't have to rebuild your calipers, because what happens, let's just rinse them off. Now what happens eventually is, if this stuff builds up and up, the salt water gets in behind there, and in behind there there's two seals. You have a dust seal and an actual pressure seal. Well, the dust seal is to keep the crap out of the pressure seal, and it does a good job, but eventually, let's just drop that in there to soak. Just want to make this point. The way it works is that if you imagine that's a groove, that there is a little groove in the piston, and in it sits a rubber seal. And in the back of that, obviously water mixed with salt from the roads gets in there, and it gets hot. That means the water dries away, evaporation, and then what remains behind is the salt, and that salt builds up like that, and it pushes that seal off the surface a little bit. You get a layer of salt crusted inside that groove, and it builds up and up and up and up. And if you've ever had that thing where you pump the piston out, you see a bit of rubber poking out, that's the dust seal. It's literally grown its way. The salt's grown in there so much. Every heat cycle, every bit of salt water on that disc causes that to expand out further, and eventually your dust seals pop out. You've got no dust seals, then the water and salt's getting into the pressure seal, and then you're in a world of hurt. Your brakes then basically need fully refurbishing, and we've done that video. So if you have got brakes that are in a really bad way and they're beyond this, then you can just go to our video, which is caliper rebuild. Delboy's Garage caliper rebuild. There's two of them, front and rear, and they work a treat. Right, now that's had a couple of seconds in there just to soak. Now obviously that soapy water is not good to leave on there, so I'm going to use this brake cleaner and evacuate all that crap out of there. As you can see by the stuff that's coming off, it's still coming out of there black. It is pretty serious, but that's as good as they need to be for this one. That's it, there we are. Now while I let that just drip dry, put the bucket out of the way, we'll deal with the pads next. Now the pads themselves get crudded up and then they don't release properly, so just going to leave that to dry off. Where's the pads? Here we are. Now it's what you're looking at for the pads. If they're perfectly, I mean, a lot of people say why not bung some new pads in. Well, that depends how much money you've got, doesn't it? You've got a lot of crap around here, so I'm going to get a little screwdriver and just give these a clean off all that stuff around there that builds up, and all that is like that. Just get that off. It's only brake dust, bit of road salt right there. That's it, nice and clean. If you've got a groove in the middle of your pads, that groove is for the purpose of telling you when they're worn out, and the idea of it is that when you look down into your pads from the back of the caliper, you can see the groove, and when the groove disappears you know that there's only 3mm left, and that's not enough, so you need to replace them. But these don't have that. You have to work it out for yourself. There we are. There's one clean. Same on the other one. It's just like a little trip to the dentist, eh? Get all the tartar off. But don't be too aggressive with these, because you can damage the pads. You just want an old screwdriver, gently slide it along that edge, and you're taking off the rust and the salt, making those pads good again. Okay? And they're in the bucket. Let the toothbrush go. There it is. Now all we do with that is give that a good scrub round. Same thing as we did just now, so that they're lovely and clean. On the back as well, don't forget the back. You get corrosion on the back of them that grows. So we'll clean them off a bit more in a sec. Another one. Just using the brake cleaner to get the soap and any residue of salt in there off. Because this stuff's great, it just dries away. That's it. Right, let those dry off. We're ready to put it back together. Right. Now just a little bit of time taken with the pins that hold the whole thing in. Bit of emery cloth, clean them up, take the corrosion off them for the last 6 months. Which incidentally is roughly how long you should be doing this. I would say every 6 months. Midsummer, you do get brake dust in midsummer, and in the winter. Just before the winter preferably, because that's when the slippery time comes. That's good. Right, Now, on the pads, before we pop them back in, there's a little something which a lot of people have pointed out that I don't always do. Pop a little bit of copper grease on the back of the pads, just where they touch the pistons. Now, the purpose of this is to prevent or reduce the effects of the high frequency vibration as they judder. You get this super high frequency juddering, which leads to the squeaking noise. So in a simple sentence, put the copper slip on the back of your pads, stops them squeaking when you put the whole lot back together. So they go back in face to face. Remember, they weren't handed, so we're going to drop them in, push the pistons right back out the way, right back, so that when you push them in, they don't scrape against the face of the piston and then scrape all the copper slip off. Just pop them in so they're nice and loose, up that way. Remember, our little spring goes in between, keeps them apart, and then we've got a little pin there which they go into. Now that spring goes down and you just pick them up as you go through. Now, just before I put that thread to bed, I'm just going to pop a little bit of copper slip on that. All this does, copper slip, if you've never seen it or used it before, which I'd be surprised, I think we've all heard of it now, it's a high temperature grease that doesn't melt. You can put it on something and it won't seize. There are better anti-seize compounds, there are fancy pants ones. You can decide to use what you want. I always just use a bit of copper slip. And so, more importantly, with your main agent, that's all they use. I had somebody wrote to me recently, he said, oh, you shouldn't use copper slip because it melts. You should use a special silicone, special expensive stuff. Well, I haven't got enough money, so I just use copper slip, eh? Right, we'll pop it back on. Get your little screwdriver nice and clean. Just make sure that they're out of the way. Don't lean against them because you'll only scuff them. And just pop it back in place. Here we are. That's back in situ. And the same goes for these two bolts. Obviously you're going to want to get them out again. So poke a little bit of whatever is your favourite anti-seize on them. And that's fine. Just a little dab. And not obviously Loctite. Someone wrote to me recently and said that they'd bought a bike and that the previous owner had used Loctite on the bolt threads, which was comical because it stripped the caliper out. It's only an aluminium casting. You don't need to lean on it, monkey boy. Yeah, you're thanks. Let's hold that back in place.
So easy, even I could do this.
Oh, thanks. There we go. And that's your caliper back on. Right, that is the caliper refurbished, but there's one more little job. If you've got floating or semi-floating discs, you've got these bobbins here. And I've done a video on this, but I just want to refresh what we did with that, just so you can make a complete job of it and not make... Right. Now, if you're going to do yours up, look up the recommended torque settings and torque them up. What I've done, if you come in close, man, see on there, if you can reach, there's some orange marker paint. Can you see it there?
Yep.
And the bolt there on the leg of the fork and on the bolt they're almost adjacent. And the last time I did those up, I made those marker paint dots. There we go. So that's now done up fine. Now, just pump the pistons back out. Actually, I'll come back to that in a minute. Let's just do these first. Let's give you a quickie on these bobbins as quick as I can. Right, here's the thinking. This is not a floating caliper, this is a solidly mounted caliper, meaning it's got a solid mount onto the fork leg. And if you have a solidly mounted caliper, you need a floating or semi-floating disc, because obviously if the disc itself sits perfectly between the pads, then every time that they're actuated, they're going to hit each side of the disc at instantaneously the right moment, and you get much crisper, sharper braking. If one caliper piston on one side isn't moving, then you're getting this. Effectively, you're hitting one side of the disc and you're bending the disc across. And that's why the disc itself must be free to move. Those pistons will not always stay nice and free flowing. They will jam up, it's just the way they work. So naturally you need the disc to move. If that if those pads come out and they touch one side at once, that disc needs to move as quickly as possible, and that's why we have these bobbins. There are three parts in a brake disc. You've got the carrier, which is this bit in the centre, the rotor on the outside, and these things in here are bobbins or cotton reels, call them what you like. But they are separate from them. They're three separate unrelated parts. On the back there's a little clip that clips them in. Won't get into that, but what happens with these is they get jammed up with brake dust. Can you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Now mine move because I keep them maintained, but I've seen when I first got this bike they were seized up solid, and all you do in order to clean those out is take a bolt big enough to go through and stick out the other side. On the back, bolt through, nut on the back, and just do it up with your fingers, finger tight, so it's on the back. Now with a ratchet on the front you can rotate, you're actually rotating the bobbin, and then all you do, bit of brake cleaner, and that's, look at that moving. Now you see how that moves, and then all you do is go around all of them. Simplest way in the world to clean your bobbins out. I've heard from riders who've said to me, actually they didn't even know the bike had movable bobbins. Put that in, again pop it in. I'm going to go around them in order now. As soon as that bites just finger tight, try to turn it, that will turn the bobbin, and then just hold your brake cleaner against it and it will move, and release it off. And there are what, 8 or 10 on this one. I'm just going to do them all. That's the next one. You can hear that crunchy noise, and then once you've cleaned it out, it's not so crunchy anymore. You've got rid of the noise. You will find, I guarantee, if you've never done this, you'll have several or maybe all of them that are completely seized, and this will make sure that they're moving. Right, and that's it, that'll do. Now when you've done that and you've found yourself the nut and bolt you need, keep in your toolbox, that's your bobbin bolt, and that's it. Now that's the brakes refurbished. We've got this movement. If you look at your, if you watch here, see a little bit of movement there, that's correct. And all of them should move freely by hand. If you can't move them by hand, then get cracking with the old brake cleaner. Now, some people have said to me in the past they like to do this and put some copper slip on them with a cotton bud. You can do what you like, but personally I would just never go there. Do not put lubricant on there of any kind. This is brake cleaner. On the last video I did of this, so many people don't listen. In the email they go, well, why are you putting WD-40 on your brakes? It's not, it's just brake and carburetor cleaner. It's the solvent stuff that rinses all that crap out. It's not lubricant. I can't stress that enough. Don't use, although you're trying to make something free up, don't use WD-40, GT85 plus gas, anything else that is a lubricant. It must be a drying cleaner, a proper brake cleaner. That's it. And the final job that is the most important, watch this. You've had your pistons pumped back out the way. So you get on your bike, you go for the first test ride, and you go to the first junction. You pull up behind a car, pull the brakes in, bang, straight into the bar, no brakes, straight into the back of the car, because you haven't pumped them out. There's a gap, as I've said 3 times now, of about 50 thousandths of an inch between the pads and the disc face. And that gap, you've pushed it back in order to get the pads off and then put them back on again and do all this work. So when you ride up the road, they're still back here. Now you need to, as you pump them, they'll come back out and then they'll sit, they'll touch, and then they'll just do their normal job of moving that little bit. But before you pump them out, you will get no brakes, and that is a real poop-anta. I've done it twice now, and it really isn't funny. It certainly concentrates your attention, it really does. So there we are. You don't have to take it to a reputable dealer or a dealer of any kind. They will charge you a minimum, I would say, of an hour for that. which for most dealers is at least £75 or more. You might be looking at maybe 150 if you've got a BMW or a Harley Davidson. You just don't need to do it. If you don't have bobbins, you don't need to do the bobbin bit, but certainly cleaning your caliper out, cleaning your pads out once every 6 months is essential. So there we go, a little bit of a safety tip for you. Just thought we'd refresh that. This is an old video, we've done this before and I think the video is up to 50,000 hits now, but I want to refresh it, bring it bang up to date for all the new viewers that we're getting these days. This is probably the only piece of maintenance, housekeeping on your bike that you should never skimp on. Okay, there we are, take it easy, ride safe, thanks for watching. Enjoy the winter. See you next time.